everybody, and welcome back to the Life Path Podcast, episode 2. Well, it's episode 3, I guess, but episode 2 as far as guests go. So this week I am talking with Alison Hartrum, and Alison is someone that I have told you guys about in my own personal story. Alison is the person that I came to live with here in Philadelphia. She's the person that I met on Facebook, and she invited me to stay in her home without us ever meeting or knowing each other prior. So I think that kind of gives you a little bit of insight about the kind of person she is just from that. But let me tell you a little bit more about Alison. Alison was born and raised in central New Jersey and currently resides in Philadelphia with her 2 dogs, Sammy and Callie. She holds a bachelor's degree of marketing from the University of Louisville, and upon graduation, she quickly became a very successful salesperson at New York Life and worked her way up to become partner before the age of 30. She's a longtime believer of the law of attraction and manifestation and has recently really followed those things and made changes in her life, as you will see in our conversation today. Alison has traveled all around the world and plans to continue to do that once this pandemic is hopefully soon over with. So here is my conversation with Alison Hartrum. Hi, Alison. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
So I brought you on today because I think you have a really interesting journey, even since we met, which is only recent. In the past few months, you've gone on quite the journey, and I really wanted to explore that with you. But first, I wanted to start off by taking a trip back in time with you and looking into kind of where your motivation started, maybe somewhere in childhood, if there's a moment or some moments that shaped you into who you are now, and maybe some reasons why you've chosen the path that you have taken.
Yeah, that sounds good. There's really like one memory that is very distinctive for me that I always use it as an example as to why I initially went into the industry that I did. When I was in first grade, if you remember having to sell things out of those catalogs, like the wrapping paper and candles and things like that.
Yes.
Well, I remember being in first grade and like I got that and I was so motivated to sell more than anybody. And the more that you sold, the better the price was that you got. They would give you like little gifts or whatever for like how much you sold. And I just remember like literally going door to door to door to door, all my neighbors, my mom would bring it into work. Like it was a whole family affair. My aunts, my grandma, like everybody was trying to help me sell this stuff. And I actually sold more in the first grade than anybody in like the whole tri-state area.
Oh my God.
And it was this, yeah, it was this like really big deal. And I remember I won a TV and an art easel, and it was so cool to like win that. And really just to like really see my competitive drive shine through in that moment. And so like ever since then, and that one memory, like I've always really been motivated to win things and compete and specifically sell. I've always kind of had that entrepreneurial spirit about me.
Yeah. And you mentioned that that was something that seemed like a family affair for you. Is that something that your whole family was like a very competitive family? Was that kind of the vibe growing up?
It's interesting because I'm really the only person in my family that's got that entrepreneurial spirit. But at the same time, my family has always been really heavily involved while I was growing up. Like my mom was my cheer coach pretty much from start to finish. My dad coached soccer when I did that when I was young. And then that didn't work out so well. So then we transitioned to softball. And then he was my coach for all those years. And so my family was always like really heavily involved. Same thing with like cheer competitions, my grandma, they all came to everything. So yeah, definitely.
And so you're a cheerleader growing up. So that's definitely a super competitive sport to be involved in. Was that something that you actually like did competitions with?
Yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned that because I was just looking at my at YouTube the other day. Somebody posted a video from 14 years ago of us doing like a cheer competition, and I was just watching it yesterday. So yeah, definitely we went to nationals and competed. I did it all year round, and so that was a huge part of my life growing up.
Nice. Did you do any other sports or was it just the cheer?
That was the big one. I mean, I did do softball a little bit, but by the time I got to high school, it was like cheer kind of took over everything. It was all season,
Yeah.
all year round.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that
it's
was
one
the
of
big
those
one.
things that really takes over your life, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. But it was fun. So I definitely enjoyed it.
So, when you were in high school, was there any classes that you were taking at that time that you kind of had a deep interest in, or anything that started to really spark your interest, making you think, wow, this is really what I want to do with my life?
You know, it's interesting. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I actually, when I was in high school, I did high school for half of the day. And then I also did like a VOTEC the other half of the day.
Okay.
And I was always very busy, but the VOTEC was for cosmetology. So I was going to get my cosmetology license while I was still in high school and being a cheerleader and working. Like I was always very, very busy.
Right.
And that was just normal for me,
Yeah.
juggling a lot of things at once, you know?
Type A personality, 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah.
So, by the time you graduated high school, you already had your license to be a cosmetologist?
Yes. So I started the cosmetology program my junior year, and it was a 3-year program. So by the time I graduated, I still had one more year,
Okay.
which was actually why I didn't go away to college. So I'm going to kind of fast forward into that phase of my life as we're talking. But I didn't get the opportunity to go away to college because I had to finish my cosmetology.
Okay.
And so I stayed locally to do the community college for 2 years, and I felt like I had missed out on something.
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately, by the time I got my associate's degree and had my cosmetology license, I was like, man, I need to get away. I
Yeah.
need to go somewhere to college and have that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did was I put 50 states in a hat. I'm not kidding you.
Oh my
And
God.
I said, whatever I pull out of this hat, whatever state I get is where I'm going to go to college. And so that's what I did. I put all 50 states in a hat, and actually it was like a plastic Ziploc bag, and I still have it. But I pulled out Kentucky, and I ended up moving to Kentucky and went to the University of Louisville, and realized once I got there that my cosmetology license wasn't grandfathered into another state. So I did all that work and couldn't work
Oh,
in the salon anyway.
that that idea, that risk that you took to
Oh
put all
yeah.
50 states into a hat. I can't imagine. I mean, what if you pulled out like Alaska? Like, who
Oh
would
my
you have
gosh.
been? You know what I mean? That's really crazy
It's
because
so crazy.
all the states really are so different, especially like if you're thinking about, well, you're in the South, but you know, if you're in a different part of the country, it's just such
Hmm.
a different vibe that you would be
Yeah.
getting and different people you would be meeting.
Yeah, I think about that all the time. And I have that conversation with a lot of my best friends from Kentucky just because it's like the butterfly effect. You know, one
Mm-hmm.
decision that one person makes, it's a ripple effect. It impacts all of these other people. And so I just was having that conversation with some of my friends from Kentucky, and what not only that has done for me by moving there, but how it's impacted their lives as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's totally interesting.
So how did that work out? How did the random choice of Kentucky work out for you?
Believe it or not, like it was better than I expected it to be. I was really concerned, to say the least, to move to Kentucky, but I ended up liking it so much that I stayed for 2 years after I did get my degree at the University of Louisville. So it was an unexpected, amazing opportunity and an awesome experience. I really enjoyed it.
And what did you study while you were there?
So, you know, Kim, I really like always have to be juggling a lot of things at once. And so I started out at the university going for, mind you, I already had my associate's degree. in business, like liberal arts or something like that. And then when I went to Louisville, I was doing a double major. So I didn't know if I wanted to be a nurse, or maybe I wanted to open up my own hair salon, or maybe I wanted to do marketing. So I went in as nursing, business, marketing.
All those go
And
together
eventually
so well.
dropped the nursing. Yeah, with a cosmetology license.
I mean, I'm sure you could make some sort of business out of that, right? Like maybe caring for people with cancer, and you're helping them with their hair.
Doing their
and,
hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just I don't know. I just had to stay busy all the time.
Yeah.
That's always how I've been. I always have to stay busy.
Right. So you graduated there after 2 years with a marketing degree?
Yep. I graduated. I basically took classes all the way through. So I decided to do summer classes, and I just wanted to graduate.
Right.
And so, yeah, I graduated with a business or a marketing degree in business. And that was December 2011.
Okay. So you said you ended up staying in Kentucky afterwards. So what did you end up doing? Like, was there something that you stayed for besides, the fact that you liked Kentucky? Was there something that you had your eye on there as far as a career went?
Yeah. So my lease at my apartment went until June, and I graduated in December. So I was like, okay, well, I have 6 months basically on my lease. So I probably should find a job.
Right.
And so at that point in my life, I was looking for work. I actually interviewed at a ton of places. So I was looking for work, but I wasn't looking for my forever career.
Yep.
But I also wasn't going to settle. So I actually went on 23 different interviews.
Yep.
And nothing was like resonating with me. It was like I was interviewing at all these different companies, all these different industries. With a marketing degree, I mean, the sky's the limit as far as the industry is concerned. I mean, you can market any industry that you want to.
Exactly.
So I felt a little bit lost at that point. So I was just interviewing with anybody who would schedule an interview with me.
Right.
But to answer your question, so that's what happened. So fast forwarding a little bit, I ended up finding a job, and I don't know, I didn't want to leave after 6 months of just kind of getting my like feet wet with that company. I felt like, okay, well, it's time to stay here a little bit longer and see how this opportunity pans out.
Okay. So was it a marketing position then you ended up finding down there?
So I was looking for some type of like sales position.
Okay.
And I did have 2 criteria. And my criteria was it was definitely not going to be an insurance company. No matter what, I wouldn't even interview with them.
Okay.
And it also could not have anything to do with something that was commission driven. Those are my only 2 criteria when I was interviewing.
All right.
So where did I end up? I ended up at a commission-based insurance company.
I was going to say, there's some foreshadowing in what you just said there.
Yeah. So I don't even know, like, it's really kind of crazy how I ended up there, but I just think everything happens for a reason. And, I ended up staying with that company for almost 8 years. So it's just funny, you set these boundaries and guidelines for yourself because you think you know what you want. And then it turns out that you really have no idea sometimes. And you just kind of, go with the flow and see how things work out. And it's not what you expected it to be, but it's pretty awesome anyway.
You never know. Yeah, I think for someone like you, someone who's so competitive and motivated, that type of pay actually probably worked in your favor, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was frightening, but it was so intriguing to me. I remember, the company that I worked for was New York Life. And I remember going through the interview process. It was a 3-part interview. And so by the first interview, I was intrigued a little bit. The second interview was more of a presentation where they told me like the compensation package.
Yep.
And that was when I didn't even make it down the elevator by the time I emailed the gentleman to tell him, hey, I'm super interested in this career, because I was so driven by or so motivated by that commission structure because I knew my personality, exactly like you said. Like I knew that I was going to be successful and the opportunity was phenomenal. I just couldn't pass it up.
Was there something about you that they liked? So obviously ended up hiring you and you stayed there for a long term. Was there something, once they finally gave you, the offer that they said, Alison, we really liked these traits about you and that's why we want to have you on board?
It's making me laugh right now because, like I said, I spent 8 years with that company. So, like in hindsight, I know the process and like the interviewing process and what a great candidate looks like.
Yeah.
And I was not a great candidate, by definition. So, this was a commission-based sales position, and here I am. I'm 22 years old, right? I have no warm market, meaning like I'm not from Kentucky, so I didn't have, a lot of clients and potential people to start with. I didn't know a lot of people there. I came from a cold source, so nobody in the company had any idea who I was. Usually they like to hire from referrals and people that are like friends of people that are already working there.
Okay.
So it's just funny because here I come in like being young, not knowing anybody. They don't know me. And so yeah, I guess they just must have liked the way that I carried myself in the interview, or they were desperate for a hire.
Yeah.
I don't know. They might have just needed somebody that year.
Wow. That's crazy. So What was the position that you're initially hired into at New York Life?
The position that I started out as was a agent, like an insurance agent.
Okay.
So I started off basically just selling life insurance. I didn't have many licenses to start. I did have to get a life license to work for them. And at the time, that was all I could sell was life insurance. So I started very basic.
Okay. And so you were there, you worked your way up, eventually proving yourself, right? And getting more responsibilities. How long did it take for you to kind of move to that next level while you were there?
So it's interesting because at New York Life, you're either, a lot of people will stay agents forever. And the reason for that being is that you can really grow your practice. And, you can hire staff and you can open up your own office. You could even set up your own, we call it a DBA. So doing business as, like, you could set up your own name, like Alison Hartrum Financial Services, presented by New York Life, something like that. So when I transitioned, eventually I did transition into management.
Yep.
I didn't look at it so much as a promotion. I just looked at it as like a new opportunity or a new phase within the company. But for me, like, it wasn't easy being in that role because, like I said, I started off in Kentucky and I was an agent in Kentucky for about 1.5 years before I ended up moving to Philadelphia, which is where I live now. And I didn't know a single person in Philly. So it was like I had to restart my business all over again. So yeah, it took me some time to kind of really get in the groove again as an agent, first in Kentucky and then again in Philadelphia before I then became a manager and start to build my own team.
Okay. Wow. So it's like you almost had to start all over again once you moved.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that was not easy because let me tell you, Philadelphia is a lot more expensive than Kentucky. So it was like my cost of living went up and yeah, it was tough, but I made it work.
Obviously. So you became a manager eventually in Philadelphia. So I guess I'm not really sure how it works in life insurance. So like what made you get that promotion? Was it a position that became available that you had applied for, or was it, your outstanding work that, they made them see that you should be, a manager? What was it that made you move up to that position?
Yeah, so that company in particular, they definitely have guidelines and it's unique because it's like you don't have to wait for a spot to open up. If you want to move into the next role, and the title was called partner. So if you wanted to become a partner, you knew exactly what you had to do, right? Okay. So I had to have so many sales under my belt. I had to be making so much money. I had to prove myself in these different levels. But for me, it wasn't so much about, like I said, calling it a promotion or anything like that. For me, it was realizing how much this career had changed my life
Mm-hmm.
and how many people I had been able to impact as one agent. So if I had, let's say, 70 new clients a year as an agent, I felt like I was making this huge impact in the community. I was helping all of these families. I was protecting all these people. I was building all of these relationships, but I was just one person.
Right.
So once I realized, hey, if I start hiring a team and teaching my team how to do this, my impact becomes so much greater. And for me, that was why I wanted to start looking into the management career path with New York Life, because I wanted to have a bigger reach. I wanted to impact more people. And so for me, that was why I made the transition.
Okay. And so you said you were able to build your own team. Was that consistent of people that were already within the company, or did you actually hire people from outside the company?
Yeah, so that was my role, was to hire, train, and develop. So basically recruit people that were not already with the company.
Okay.
So my role was to find them, and we did that in various different ways. But generally it would be because, I'd be out and about and I'd see the way that somebody was interacting with, somebody else. Maybe they were a server at a restaurant
Mm-hmm.
or something. And I could just realize that, this person looks like they have what it takes. And maybe they're not reaching their full potential doing what they're doing right now. And I would just strike up a conversation with them. That was really my role, was to talk to anybody and everybody and not be shy and
Mm-hmm.
ask for referrals and, just constantly be on the lookout for who else could be good at this.
Okay. Yeah, I used to do that as well in my past life, at my old job when I kind of helped with recruiting. I would do that as well. I'd be at
Mm-hmm.
like the pharmacy and I'd notice, the
Yeah.
cashier was, extra friendly and, she really was attentive to people. And I'd say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we have this opening where there's actually, benefits. And so I get that. I see that as well still when I go out somewhere. If someone is really going above and beyond, I kind of think, what else could this person be achieving? Where else could they fit in? So that's cool. So you build your team. How many people do you have working under you?
The retention in the insurance industry is not that great. It was
Mm-hmm.
something that we really prided ourselves on, being above average in the industry. But every year there was high turnover, which was why it was like constantly always looking for the next best person, but also trying to keep the people that you already had.
Yep.
And so for me, my biggest focus was really creating a team environment in a really independent industry. I felt like if my team felt like they had other people that they could depend on and have to support them and know that they could always come to me, and they felt like this was like family rather than, just being in the office, that was my biggest thing. So it was all about finding the right people,
Mm-hmm.
but then having more quality over quantity and understanding that this is a very high turnover business, and
Mm-hmm.
just doing what I could to keep them happy and successful. Remember, they were earning commission, so it was important that we helped them financially, like, be stable.
Can you recall any specific things that you did while you were a manager to kind of foster that relationship with your team?
Yeah. Yes, I can. There was a lot that I tried to do. I try to think outside of the box a lot of times, and I had to constantly be reminded that this is a highly regulated industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I found to be most successful, I ended up getting in a lot of trouble for doing.
Uh-oh.
But I took my team to Baltimore, and I rented out this huge house and this Airbnb. And, I basically did a 3-day workshop with them. It was really structured. And I was always, like, in all of my meetings, I was very structured. I would have a schedule and I would set a timer, and it was very like, at this time we're doing this and this and this. And so I had it set up like that, where it'd be like I would teach them something, and then we would play like a team building game, and then we would do some like hands-on things, and then we would do another team building activity. And so I had it like that for the whole 3 days, and I think that was probably the best thing that I ever did for my team. And unfortunately, it just it didn't sit well with the company. So I wasn't allowed to do that again. But we had an awesome time, and I don't really regret it. So
Yeah, that sounds awesome. You sound like
yeah,
a really fun manager.
yeah, we had a good time. So I tried to kind of copy that just locally at the office
Yeah,
afterwards. It wasn't as fun, being in the office as it was being in Baltimore, but
I'm sure.
I did what I could. Yeah.
So I know at some point after being a partner for a while, you had started to maybe have a change of heart or something happened. Can you kind of walk me through when that thought pattern began and kind of the steps that you have started to take in your life leading up to that?
Yeah. So, in being a good manager, it was like you were always trying to juggle a lot of different things. And for me, it was always about learning new stuff. And one of the things that I wanted to incorporate into the office and into my team was I started this book club with my agents. And the book club was really just like different self-help books or, motivational books or how to be a better salesperson, things like that. And because I was leading that book club, and it didn't last very long, I couldn't get a lot of people to join, but because I was leading it, I had to read the books and I
Right.
had to be really prepared and whatever. And so some of the books that I started reading were just subtly putting things in my head. And I wasn't even realizing it was happening right away, but it would be things like, um, you know, is what you're doing like really your fiery passion? Like, do you feel like you're making a huge difference in the world? Are you happy with what you're doing? And so I just started thinking about things like that. And I knew that I loved the company that I worked for. I knew that I loved what I was doing, but I felt like I had missed out on some things, and for me that was traveling
Mm-hmm.
and exploring the world. And so I felt like I started my career at such a young age that I missed an opportunity to take a gap year or do some things that I really wanted to do. And at the company I felt like I was just taking on more and more and more responsibility as my team was getting bigger and I was looking at the next promotion potentially and things like that. And so between reading the books and starting to like think about how I was feeling and really just pay attention to what my gut was telling me, I just ultimately decided at one point like I had to take some time for me, and for me that meant walking away from a career that I actually really loved.
Mm. Yeah, because I mean, like you said, you kind of fell into this. You weren't looking to get
Right.
into your forever job, but somehow you ended up in this career and you kept moving up. And I know as you get more successful and have more responsibilities, it just takes over your life more and more.
Yeah.
And I know it can be like a blink of an eye, and all of a sudden, like your 20s are gone.
Oh my
And
gosh. Yeah.
what were you doing? You were working. So,
Well, that
yeah.
was the thing too. Like I have a lot of friends in other like demanding careers. Um, but I felt like I was the person that like couldn't shut it off.
Mm-hmm.
Like my friends would work really hard and they'd be stressed when they'd come home, but they could shut it off. Whereas me, like I remember one time I went to Bolivia and I told my team, you're not going to be able to get in contact with me. I'm going to be in Bolivia. I'm not going to have Wi-Fi for a while. It's going to be really challenging. And I just remember like sneaking away at one point to try to find somewhere that had Wi-Fi so that I could work while I was on vacation, even though I was planning not to when I went there. And it was like I just could never shut it off.
Mm-hmm.
And so that definitely played a role as well, just realizing like how much I was investing, how much time, energy, and I just couldn't shut it off. I told you I'd go to the restaurant and I'm like recruiting somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I mean, that can be a good thing and a bad thing, right? Like obviously there's some passion there behind it
yeah.
and you really cared
hmm
about your career, but at the same time, like you said, you wanted to travel, you wanted to do all these other things, and it just took over.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So
So you ended
go
up
ahead.
leaving after 8 years. I know that's
Yes.
there's a story like even within that as well, because I know that was something that happened very suddenly, and that was pretty much right around when we met, basically, right?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, I had been thinking about it actually for 2 years before I made the move. But it was always something that I just was kind of thinking about, but not ever serious about. And
Mm.
so I had been talking about it, thinking about it, making pros and cons lists. But in the back of my mind, I was never going to leave. I mean, I was very financially secure. And that was one of the biggest things keeping me there. Like the income that I was earning was very attractive. And I
Mm.
knew it was only going to get better. That company took very, very good care of me. So that's why I was never going to leave. But actually, oh man, I went on a trip. So I did a volunteer trip to Peru, and while I was there, I was only there for a week, and I went to work with some of their street dogs that were in need of shelter or medical attention or food or whatever it was. And so I flew to this country to work with these dogs, and I was in Peru for 7 days, but I was only with the dogs for 4 or 5 days. And I felt like, yeah, this was great, but I didn't make any kind of impact. That was how I was feeling. Felt like, gosh, this isn't enough time to do anything profound. And so when I was on that plane ride back from Peru, I remember I was like prepping for my Monday morning meeting and just feeling so sick on that airplane. Like I just felt like, yeah, it was great that I got to travel for the little bit of time that I did, but it just wasn't enough. And so it was really that plane ride that really I was just sitting there feeling sick, and I was like, I need to do something. And so that was a Sunday. I came back. Monday I went to the office. I remember kind of being like a zombie through meetings Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I wasn't feeling good. So Thursday morning, I I canceled all of my meetings on Thursday and I went to a psychic. And long story short, the psychic was like, yeah, she was like, you're about to, in a nutshell, she basically said, you're about to um, leave whatever career you're working in right now. And she's like, within, I think she said 7 weeks or something like that. She's like, I see you traveling all over. And I don't know. She was just really impressive. And so when she said that, I was like, boom, there's my answer. I drove from the psychic to the office and quit.
That's
That was
crazy.
how that happened. Also, keep in mind, the reason you and I met was because at the time that you and I met, I was still working for this company,
Yep.
but I was so motivated by your story. You were traveling, you were leaving, your home to come to a new city and start a new job and this new life for yourself. And that was why you and I met in the first place, was because I was living vicariously through you. Like I was there in my stomach, like in the pit of my stomach, like I wanted to be doing that, but I
Yeah.
just didn't see it to be feasible. And then it was like, you did it. And then I don't know.
Yeah, I think we all need that like little push, or, that person to like look at and say, okay, well, they were able to make this big change, so why can't I?
Like I knew that at the end of the day, um, whatever decision I made, I knew that if I had been able to be successful once, we'll call it once, right?
Right.
I've been successful a lot of times, but if I was able to be successful once in a career and move up a ladder and, be making a fantastic income before I was even 30 and, doing all these great things for myself, I said, if I can do that once, I sure as hell can do it again. And
Right.
so that kind of got me through any of the fear that I had, just having faith in myself.
Yeah. So you quit and you have all this freedom now. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, after I left, that was interesting to me because it was all that I knew.
Yeah.
I had gone my whole life through school and then working multiple jobs and then this career. And I just like the first week or so, I don't even remember it really. It's just, it was very new to me, but I knew that I wanted to take the time to travel And I had previously gone to Mexico with my cousin back in 2015. And I think it was 2015. I just loved Mexico, something about it. And I have two small dogs, and, I couldn't just leave them for months on end if I were to go somewhere internationally that they couldn't come with me. And so I was like, you know what? Mexico is the perfect place to go because I'm sure I can drive there. I'm sure I can figure that out. And there's got to be a way that, I can bring the dogs in my car with me. And so I spent a lot of the weeks after resigning cleaning things up, just cleaning things up at the company and with my agents and in my life, and really planning this road trip. And so, yeah, I decided that I was going to road trip to Mexico and back. And so it was a lot of planning to figure that out and make sure that I could do it, and where was I going to stop and how was I going to pay for it and all of that. So
Yeah. And how many states did you end up going through?
that's a good question. I could read them off. Let's see. I went to Charlotte, North Carolina. What did I do? Charlotte, Atlanta, and then Mobile, New Orleans, Lafayette, and then Austin, Texas. So I stayed 6 cities before I actually crossed the border into Mexico. And then once I was in Mexico, I did 5 more cities in Mexico.
And
I stayed in Mexico for 6 weeks.
Okay. How long was your trip in total?
It was 2 months, almost exactly. So it was a nice little road trip. And yeah, I am ready to do it again. As soon as we're able to start traveling again, I'm back on that road.
Yeah, you have the travel bug now for sure.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Is there anything from that trip that you can share, either like revelations or just some great moments that you had, or even some terrible moments that you had on that trip that you can share?
Yeah, so that trip was very intimidating to me, like the day or two before I did it. So it was intimidating to me the day or two before I actually left to get on the road. And I had that same fear and anxiety right before I left to cross the border. So 2 times I felt a lot of anxiety and fear. And I mentioned that because that fear came from external sources. Mm-hmm. People were calling me and saying, what are you doing? You're a single female about to go on this 2-month road trip into another country. Like, are you crazy? And a lot of the time I wasn't letting them get to me. But I remember right before I crossed the border, from Texas into Mexico, a couple people reached out to me, and they just were putting so much fear into me that it impacted how I was feeling physically, how I was feeling mentally. And I almost had second thoughts. And so that was really profound, because as I've been on this journey of self-improvement, I have really been focused on, are these feelings that I'm feeling actually my feelings, or are they being pushed on to me by other people because other people are afraid? And so that's been my biggest thing, being on that trip and just really getting to know who I am as a person, mm-hmm. and doing what I want to do. That was the point of me leaving in the first place, was to do something that I want to do. And so I got a lot of pushback from people from all angles, like, oh, what are you doing leaving such a great company and blah, blah, blah. And it was those same people that didn't want me working for the company because they were afraid of me doing something that was commission based. Once they saw that I was successful and making 6 figures and moving up the ladder, now those were the people telling me not to leave. And so I had to remind myself that, these people, they have fear for themselves, and that's why they're not doing what I'm doing. And I just have to not let it get to me. I have to just follow my gut and follow my heart.
Right.
So that was my biggest thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, fear has its place, right? I mean, sometimes it's something that you need to listen to, but I think a lot of people who are speaking from fear like that, especially in that situation, it's holding them back, and they're trying to hold you back with their uh-huh. fear. And I know, for example, the fear around Mexico, it's not even necessarily based in any real truth or in any actual experience that they really had. It's just like hearsay.
Yeah. Hearsay. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. I just had this conversation. So I actually just was in Jamaica. And I met this guy while I was out there who was really impressive. And him and I had a lot in common. And he had done a lot of solo trips and we just had a lot to talk about, but we kind of had the same conversation. It's like a lot of people in theory, they say, oh man, like I wish I could do what you're doing, or I would love to quit my job and do that. But so many people don't because of that fear.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you actually sit down and think about like, holy cow, I'm going into, this thing all by myself with a completely different culture and a different language. And, I don't know anybody. The fear definitely kicks in. And so the fear was real, but it was something that I knew that I wanted to do. So I pushed past anyway.
Yeah.
And then real quick to that point of people saying like, oh, I wish I could do it, or whatever. Like that was one of the biggest things. I actually wrote a Facebook post about that because at one point I got frustrated by it because I was getting I was having people calling me and texting me and, reaching out on Facebook and saying, oh my gosh, you're such an inspiration. I would love to do it if only X, Y, and Z, or if only I could quit my job and do that, or if only I was made of money, or whatever they were saying. And it was like, that was my biggest thing, was the reality was that nobody was holding them back except for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And every time they said like, oh, I wish I could do that, I'm like, well, you can.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, but I have kids, or I don't make enough money, or whatever. And I'm like, these are just the limitations you're putting on yourself. And if you really do want to do it, you can do it.
Yep.
And so that was another big thing for me.
Yeah. And like, for me, something that I kind of kept using to inspire myself was kind of fear in the other direction, of the fear of not doing something, of living my life somewhere that I hated, doing something that I didn't like. And at the end of my life, laying in my deathbed, wishing that I had done something. So, let fear be your motivator in that way, instead of the fear of what if something happens? What if I fail? I think for me, it's, and I think for you as well, it's more of the fear of not doing something, not the fear of failing, because you can always pick yourself back up. I mean, especially, if you have some sort of, education. For you had this amazing career, multiple careers already. If you wanted to get back and pick yourself back up and start a new career or go back to the other one, that's always an opportunity. I mean, there's always a way to get back to that. But to miss out while you're still a young person, to be able to travel and experience the world, that's not something you're ever going to be able to get back.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so interesting because and that I'm a big believer in the law of attraction. And
let's talk about that a little.
Definitely. So I was going to say, like, when I left, I left for the road trip. I didn't have any forms of income, and I didn't know where it was going to come from, but I just knew that it would. And we'll get into the law of attraction in a second. But while I was on that trip, people were so inspired that, literally I had people asking to pay me to coach them. And it was just ironic because it's like, here I am, I'm just following my dreams. And, I feel like I learned a lot, working for New York Life. I feel like they taught me so much, and I grew both personally and professional by being with that company and all of the training that they had and stuff. And so I do feel very blessed in that aspect, but it's like, it was so funny when I was having all these people literally want to pay me for advice from me. And so that came to me while I was traveling, and it's been something that's been really rewarding and really awesome. And to the law of attraction, I knew money would come, and sure enough it did. So but what did you want to talk about as far as the law of attraction was concerned? How did that kind of all happen for me? And
tell us about it. I mean, I know that's something that's become more known and more people are talking about, but I guess kind of for those that don't know about the law of attraction, kind of give us some information about how that works and how that's been something that you've been utilizing in your life.
Yeah, so it started when I was probably 15. Somebody handed me a book called The Secret. And so we're talking 15, 16 years ago. I got this book that forever changed my life. And, obviously I was young then and I've grown a lot. I've been able to do a lot more research since then. But it started off as something as simple as reading this book and then reading it again and reading it again. And then, really just trying to make it a part of my daily practice. By definition, in a nutshell, the law of attraction basically says whatever you think about, you bring about. And so it's hard for somebody that's not familiar with it. I was just doing a coaching session with somebody the other day who really wants to get out of debt. And I'm big on vision boards and that's a whole nother topic, but he wanted my help with his vision board. And he kept putting things like get out of debt or like not have all these bills or not feel so buried. And I kept trying to coach him. I'm like, I understand what you're saying. You don't want to have debt, but the word that you keep cycling over and over and over and over in your head is debt, 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 debt. And so by definition of the law of attraction, by him constantly saying that and putting debt on his vision board, the law of attraction basically is saying, okay, let me give this guy some more debt, So it's what you think about is what you bring about. And so for me, it's been a learning curve to kind of learn how to implement and change my way of thinking and start thinking positively and learn how to manifest what I do want into my world and try to think less about the things that I don't want, or shift the way that I think about them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So now that you are kind of your own person, you're traveling and you're using the law of attraction to guide your life, what are your goals? What does the future look like for you? I guess what are you doing now as kind of your new quote unquote career?
Yeah, so right now we're all in a very strange time where the future is really up in the air and it's uncertain. This was going to be my big year of travel. So that's been really tough for me, and it's been hard because it's out of my control. The fact that we are on a very strict lockdown right now and not sure when that lockdown is going to be lifted. And so knowing that I went into this year planning on being in a different country or a different state pretty much every month of the year, and now knowing that that's not an option right now is got me reevaluating some things. And so at this point in time, I'm just kind of taking it one day at a time. And I'm really using this time to self-reflect and continue to work on, who I want to be and get better at using the law of attraction and creating my vision board. And that I recently started a YouTube channel. Like I just want to start spreading my message of this way of thinking and do what I can while I'm stuck in the house. As soon as this kind of lifts, then I'll continue to do all of those things, but I'll be doing them remotely from other parts of the world.
Yeah.
And that's the goal.
Nice.
But as far as my career and what I'm doing for that, it's weird because I never know how money's going to come to me.
Yeah.
At this point in my life, I know that I don't want to have a 9-to-5. I don't want to have an employer. I don't want to go on interviews. I don't want to do any of that right now. And so as far as how I'm making money and kind of self-sustaining, it just varies. I mean, random things keep happening to me that I'm not complaining about, but that's how the law of attraction works. Like you believe that money comes easily to you and somehow it does. I mean, I just got a random settlement check for some crap I had going on with a house that I bought a couple years ago. And so I wasn't expecting that money and that came in and, just little things like that where I'm doing some coaching for people and just random different things.
Nice.
Renting out, my properties and things like that. So we'll see how it goes.
Is there, are you offering your coaching to everyone? Is that something that you're putting out there right now, or do you just have a select handful of people that you're doing that for?
I wasn't advertising it as a business. These people were just coming to me. And
Law of
so
attraction.
I wasn't looking to get into the coaching. Yeah, like I wasn't looking to get into it, and they just kept like reaching out. And so right now I have a handful of people that I am helping, and um we've been doing it at our own pace. Like there's no pressure on it from either side. Like I don't want to feel like I'm pressured to have to, work all of the time, and they don't feel pressured to have to stick to a strict routine or schedule with me. So it's just been really lax and something that, we both come to a common agreement before we start the coaching. And it's been great. So yeah, if there were people that were interested and wanted to reach out and, get some advice or whatever, I'd be open to having the conversation with them, but I'm not seeking it out.
Okay. I'll make sure to leave whatever information that you feel comfortable putting out there for anybody that might be interested in learning more about that and maybe having your services for that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I guess, was there anything else that I missed out on? Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about or I guess share with anybody, either about the law of attraction or just about life and careers and kind of doing what you love and, doing what feels right for you?
Yeah, I think that my biggest thing, and I think that we definitely touched on this before, but life is so short, and people say that all the time. And, I was victim of it where it was like, yeah, I knew life was short, but I was going to work myself to the ground and, make myself sick because I was working so hard and whatever. But, my advice to you or to anybody listening is that you have to do what makes you happy. And I know that it's scary. You might be wondering like, well, how am I going to make money? How am I going to support my family? How am I going to pay my bills? What's the next move going to be? And, those are all valid questions, but you don't have to have all of the answers to take the leap and do what makes you happy. Like I left a very solid company with a lot of security. And I had literally no plan. Like at that time, I didn't even know I was going to travel. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know where money was going to come from. I didn't know why I was really leaving. I just knew that I had to leave.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the best thing is like, just if you're feeling anything, like listen to your body and, find a way to be happy. Do what makes you happy.
Is there any advice that you kind of touched on it already, but is there any advice that either you have for like a young person, someone who is similar to you, someone in high school maybe looking at what they want to do with their life? Are they going to go to college? Are they going to take a year off? Are they going to be an entrepreneur? Or someone who maybe was in your situation that you were in, where you're in a successful career, everything looks great on the outside, but maybe there's something more that you're wanting from life. Do you have advice for those people, either on, as far as education goes, or what steps to take next? Is it right for everybody to do what you did, to quit your job and to just go for it?
I think every situation is unique in its own way. First, talking about your young individual, maybe high school or whatever, a lot of those people are going to have a lot of outside influences, especially it might be their parents pushing them in one direction, or their teachers, or society, peer pressure, from their friends. So for somebody in that situation, it's really tough because it's like society tells us, okay, you go to school, then you go to high school, then you graduate, and then you go to college, and then you get a job. And that's just kind of like what our society has taught us to do.
Mm-hmm.
And pushing against that norm is really challenging, especially for somebody that's, 18, 19 years old, or however old they are, 15, 16, 17.
Yeah.
So the advice I'd have for them is, listen to what other people are saying, but then sit down and think about what feels right to you. And if you feel like, something else is coming up for you, then talk to somebody about it. You don't have to make this decision on your own, but you also shouldn't be pressured into one way or the other. So talk to somebody. Maybe it's, a counselor, a therapist, a close friend, a supportive family member, something like that. And just kind of, ping these ideas off of other people. As far as somebody in my position, or like the second example that you gave, that was in a successful career and kind of already established and stuff, that's scary too, because it's like you're walking away from security.
Yeah.
And so is that the right thing to do? Again, the situation is, it's situational. It's different for every person. For every person, it might not be to quit your job and travel the world, but if that's what their gut is telling them to do, then that's what they should do. I mean, they've got to do what's right for them and for their situation. So again, sitting with yourself, maybe it's a pros and cons list. Maybe it's meditating on it. Maybe it's, playing out the scenario and what would that look like, and then kind of revisiting that every couple of weeks and seeing if you still feel the same way. Like I said, my decision felt rash because it was like one day I was at the office and then the very next day I had resigned.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like I went into it lightly. I had been thinking about it for years.
Yeah.
And I had those pros and cons lists, and I had talked to people about it, and I had talked to a therapist about it and a business coach. And so it might have seemed rash from an outsider's perspective, but it was in my mind for a long time.
Yeah, same with me. When I quit my job, it probably seemed very sudden to many of my coworkers and other people in my life. But for me, it was just kind of like that final straw. It was something that I had been thinking about for a long time. And it was just this one last thing. My coworker that I worked very closely with had left. And it was just like, yep, now it's time for me to leave too. Like, her leaving was like, I can't stand being here anymore without her, and that is my cue to step out and to finally like push me to do what I had been like dreaming about doing for like 2 years. So yeah, I definitely understand that.
Yeah, definitely.
So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Alison, for sharing your story with us. I really love that you had this successful career and then you kind of just stepped away from it and had these great adventures, and I'm really excited to see where you're going to go next once we're able to travel and to see your adventures with the pups.
You and me both, girl.
All right, well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks so much, Kim. This was fun, and definitely anytime that you want to do a follow-up, I'd be more than happy to.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to do another episode, like I said, once you're able to travel again and maybe get more into your travel stories and all that fun stuff.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That sounds good.
All right, well, thank you, and we're going to close the show.
Thank you so much, Kim.